Okay, we were in part 4 of chapter 3, Rape of the Mind. Needling for the truth. During the Second World War, the technique of the so-called truth serum, the popular name for narcoanalysis, was developed to help soldiers who had broken down under the strain of battle. Through narcoanalysis, by means of injections of sedatives, they could be brought to remember and reveal the hyper-emotional and traumatic moments of their war experiences that had driven them into acute anxiety neurosis. Gradually, a useful mental first aid technique was developed which helped the unconscious to reveal its secrets while the patient was under the influence of the narcotic. How does the truth serum work? The principle is simple. After an injection, the mind is in a kind of half-sleep, is unable to control its secrets, and it may let them slip from the hidden reservoirs of frustration and repression into the half-conscious mind. In certain acute anxiety cases, such enforced provocation may alleviate the anxieties and pressures that have led to breakdown, but narcoanalysis often does not work. Sometimes the patient's mind resents this chemical intrusion and enforced intervention, and such a situation often obstructs the way for deeper and more useful psychotherapy. The fear of unexpected mental intrusion and coercion may be pathological in character. When I first published my concept of menticide and brainwashing, I received dozens of letters and phone calls from people who were convinced that some outside person was trying to influence them and direct their thoughts. This form of mental intrusion delusion may be the early stage of a serious psychosis in which the victim has already regressed to primitive magic feelings. In this state, the whole outside world is seen and felt as participating in what is going on in the victim's mind. There is, as it were, no real awareness of the frontiers between I, the person, and the world. Such fear-ridden persons are in constant agony because they feel themselves the victims of many mysterious influences which they cannot check or cope with. They feel continually endangered. Psychologically, their fear of intrusion from the outside can be partially explained as a fear of the intrusion of their own fantasies from the inside, from the unconscious. They are frightened of their own hidden unconscious thoughts, which they can no longer check. It would be a vast oversimplification to stick an easy psychiatric label on all such feelings of mental persecution, for there are many real outside mental pressures in our world, and there are many perfectly normal people who are continually aware of and disturbed by the barrage of stimuli directed at their minds through propaganda, advertising, radio, television, the movies, the newspapers, all the gibbering maniacs whose voices never stop. These people suffer because a cold, mechanical, shouting world is knocking continually at the doors of their minds and disturbing their feelings of privacy and personal integrity. There is the further question of whether or not the drugs used in the serum always produce the desired effect of compelling the patient to tell the inner truth. Experiments conducted at Yale University in 1951, J.M. McDonald, on 9 persons who received intravenous injections of sodium amytal, the so-called truth serum, showed interesting results tending to weaken our faith in this drug. Each of the patients prior to the injection had been suggested a false story related to a historical period about which he was going to be questioned. The experimenters knew both the true and the false story. Let me quote from the report. It is of interest that the 3 subjects diagnosed as normal maintained their suggested stories. Of the 6 subjects diagnosed as neurotic, 2 promptly revealed the true story. 2 made partial admissions consisting of a complex pattern of fantasy and truth. 1 communicated what most likely was a fantasy as truth, and the one obsessive-compulsive individual maintained his cover story except for one parapraxia, faulty or blundering action. In several cases, American law courts have refused to admit as evidence the results of truth serum tests, largely on the basis of psychiatric conviction that the truth serum treatment is misnamed. that in fact, narcoanalysis is no guarantee of getting at the truth. It may even be used as a coercive threat in cases where victims are not aware of its limited action. Still another danger more closely related to our subject is that a criminal investigator can induce and communicate his own thoughts and feelings to his victim. Thus, the truth serum may cause the patient with a weak ego to yield to the interventionist's synthetically injected thoughts and interpretations in exactly the same way the victim of hypnosis may take over the suggestions implanted by the hypnotist. Additionally, this method of inquisition by drugs contains some physical danger. I myself have seen cases of thrombosis develop as a result of intravenous medication of barbiturates. Experiments with mescaline, which started 30 years ago, are suddenly fashionable again. Aldous Huxley, in his recent book, The Doors of Perception, described the artificial chemical paradise which he experienced after taking the drug, also known as peyote. It can stimulate all kinds of pleasant subjective symptoms, but these are nevertheless delusive in character. I do not want to start a clinical argument with an author I esteem, yet his own euphoric ecstatic reactions to mescaline are not necessarily the same as those other people experience. 25 years ago, I myself experimented with mescaline in order to make a first-hand acquaintance with genuine pathological thoughts. I nearly collapsed as a result. Only a few people who have had the ecstatic experience Huxley describes. Mescaline is dangerous stuff when not used under medical control. And anyway, why does Mr. Huxley want to sell artificial heavens? There is the very serious social danger in all these methods of chemical intrusion into the mind. True, they can be used as a careful aid to psychotherapy, but they can also be frightening instruments of control in the hands of men with an overwhelming drive to power. In addition, they fortify more than ever in our aspirin age the fiction that we have to use miracle drugs in order to become free-acting agents. The propaganda for chemical elation, for artificial ecstasy and pseudo-nirvanic experience contains an invitation to men to become chemical dependents, and chemical dependents are weak people who can be made use of by any tyrannical political potentate. The actual propaganda carried on among general practitioners urging treatment of all kinds of anxieties and mental disturbances with new drugs has the same kind of dangerous implications. The lie detector. Hypnotism and narcoanalysis are only two of the current devices that can be misused as instruments of enforced intrusion into the mind. The lie detector, which has already been used as a tool for mental intimidation, is another. This apparatus, useful for psychobiological experimentation, can indicate through writing down meticulously the changes in the psychogalvanic reflex that the human guinea pig under investigation reacts more emotionally to certain questions than to others. True, this overreaction may be the reaction to having told a lie, but it may also be an innocent person's reaction to an emotion-laden situation or even to an increased fear of unjust accusation. The interpersonal processes between interrogator and testee have just as much influence on the emotional reactions and the changes in the galvanic reflex as feelings of inner guilt and confusion. This experiment only indicates inner turmoil and hidden repressions. With all their doubts and ambiguities, it is not in fact a lie detector, although it is used as such. As a matter of fact, the pathological liar and the psychopathic conscienceless personality may show less reaction to this experiment than do normal people. The lie detector is more likely to become a tool of coercion in the hands of men who look more for a powerful magic in every instrument than a means of getting at the truth. As a result, even the innocent can be fooled into false confession. This was part 4 of chapter 3. We're in the rape of the mind, and I will see you in part 5.